Hello, in this video we're looking at how to answer the questions for paper 3, Weimar and Nazi Germany. Now in this exam you'll have 6 questions to answer. We're going to go through the first 2 in this video. It's 1 hour 22 complete and it's looking at testing your knowledge of the period, so you're looking to bring in some really good detail, but also how you're able to analyse sources and interpretations. So question 1 will look like this. It will ask you, what can you infer? It's worth 4 marks, you'll have 5 minutes, and it will give you a little grid like this to fill in. So how do we go about this? Well, first of all, we need to know what infer means. And when you're inferring something, it basically means what can you work out from the source without being directly told. So, here's an example of a source. We're looking here for reasons why the Kaiser abdicated in 1918, right at the start of the course. And the source says this: workers in Germany are on strike, demanding an end to the war. All of Germany starves and blames their leader for their problems. The soldiers have refused to stop the protests, which encouraged others to rebel, and some of the German Navy have begun to mutiny. So, what can we infer from this source about why the Kaiser abdicated, why he left his position of power? Here's 2 examples that I've given. You can see I've made them in bold here in the source. The first thing I've noticed is the fact it says the workers in Germany are on strike. So from that I can work out that the Kaiser no longer had the support of the people. So I've put that down as my inference. Then, underneath it, I've added where I've got that from. I've just quoted the source. Not a big quote, just a few words there. I've then looked for a second inference. So here I've said, the soldiers have refused to stop the protests. Well, I can infer from that the army have stopped defending the Kaiser. So again, my inference goes down there, and then I've shown how I've backed that up with the detail from the source of precise quotes. You get 1 mark for doing each of these correctly. So what are some common mistakes to make? So in the first one, you can see I have just copied the source out word for word. It's not inference, I've just copied the source. So I've written down some of the German Navy have begun to mutiny. That's because the source says some of the German Navy have begun to mutiny. My second example of a mistake is bringing in my own knowledge. The assessment just wants you to look at the source here. What can you work out from the source? So bringing in your own knowledge, for example, he was told by his ministers to abdicate. There's no mention of that in the source here. Some other mistakes can be a lack of focus on the question. So if I make the inference, Germany had boats because it talks about the German Navy, it doesn't tell me why the Kaiser abdicated in 1918 and it won't count. And finally, focus on just the contents here, not the provenance, not where it came from. So here the provenance tells me it's a newspaper article from November 1917. But I won't get marks if I say that newspapers didn't like the Kaiser, because it's a newspaper article saying that. Now, your source could be a picture instead. So here's just a very quick example. From this picture of protesters about the Kaiser, what can I learn about these citizens? Well, first of all, they seem to be organised, and the reason why I'm saying that is because they've made and they're carrying signs. And the second thing that I can work out is the fact these protests seem peaceful. And the reason for that is because there's no sign of violence in the picture. So, you'll have a grid like this to fill in. It's worth 4 marks, spend about 5 minutes only. Just make sure you firstly focus on the question. Make sure you infer. Do not copy the keywords down. It's something you have worked out, not something you've been told. Back your views up. Make sure you get all 4 marks. Show where you've learnt that in the source. Don't bring in your own knowledge. This isn't a question for that. Just analyse that source on its own. Make sure you focus on the content, so the picture or the actual source itself, and not the provenance, and not too much writing on this one. You only need a sentence for each one for question 1. Question 2, explain why. You'll have done this question for paper 1 and paper 2, so it should be familiar to you. It's a 12 marker, and in the exam, I'd probably give about 15 to 18 minutes to answer this. It might look like this in your paper. So the question is, explain why Hitler became a dictator of Germany from 1933 to 1934. And it will give you 2 prompts to try to help you think about detail that you can bring in. So here we've got the Reichstag fire and we've got Ernst Röhm. The exam will tell you must use information of your own as well. And what you should be aiming for are 3 clear, where it's possible, chronological reasons, A separate paragraph for each reason with a gap in between to make it really obvious to the examiner where your points are. Make sure you focus on the question. We'll go through this in a minute, but actually explain why there was change, why something happened. Don't just describe what happened. There's no need for a conclusion for this one. You just need 3 reasons. You don't need to use the prompts given. If you don't know what they mean and you've got your own knowledge, use that instead. And there's no sources or interpretations here. It is just based on your own knowledge. It's the only question of paper that does this. So let's look at a not great paragraph. One reason why Hitler became a dictator was his removal of opposition. This was first seen after the Reichstag fire in February 1933. A Dutch communist was found by the destroyed Parliament building and found guilty. He was executed. A total of 4,000 communists were arrested on the night of the fire. Now, in this paragraph, I've described what happened with the Reichstag fire, and I've shown some knowledge. I'll get some marks. But I've not really explained how this helped Hitler become a dictator. I've not made that clear to the examiner. One thing that I would do when I'm explaining is I'd bring the question back into the answer. You can see where I've done this here in bold. So after I've described what happens, I've just put the next line being, this helped Hitler become a dictator as, and I've made that link. So now I'm showing extra knowledge. I'm showing I understand the event to my examiner. So I've said here, this helped Hitler become a dictator as he used the fire to pressure President Hindenburg into declaring a state of emergency. Now Hitler could declare laws without Parliament voting for them. The decree for the protection of people and state was issued. This gave him the power to imprison political opponents. The Communist Party was banned from taking their 81 seats in Parliament, and therefore, with the support of other nationalist parties, Hitler had a 2/3 majority in the Reichstag and could change the constitution of the Reichstag. So I've explained how the fire actually helped him become a dictator. What could he do as a result? I've also brought in some good detail there to show a knowledge of the past in this particular area. And you can see the difference in the 2 paragraphs there. One is worth far more marks. After we're done with that, we just need a second reason. You can see I've left a line there and I've developed with a second reason. Here I've started talking about the Enabling Act and how that helped Hitler become a dictator. And then a final reason, again, I'm keeping it in chronological order here because I can, and it's easy enough to do. I'm talking about Knight of the Long Knives here and how he got rid of opposition in his own party, including people like Ernst Röhm. So I'm going to use that prompt. And finally, this is roughly what the answer would look like. This would be about 15 to 18 minutes worth of writing. You can see I've left a line. It's really clear to my examiner where my 3 points are. You only need 3 reasons. You'll see I've not brought a conclusion in. Just some other drafts that you could have. If the question came up, explain why support for the Nazis grew from 1929 to 1932. Well, you could talk about unemployment and how support grew when Hitler said he could solve problems. How support for the communists meant Hitler got more support for the Nazi party from the rich, like business owners and so on, who feared the communists taking over Germany. Hitler was seen as a natural enemy to the communists. And also the fact that Hitler was seen as a strong leader at the time when the Weimar seemed very weak. They couldn't deal with the issues. And then just a final outline for a potential 12 marker. Explain why young people in Germany supported Hitler. So here again, 3 prompts. The first one, I'd talk about the Nazi youth groups, the fact that all other youth groups were banned and Hitler set up the Hitler Youth and the BDM for girls. And they taught gender-related skills, army training for boys, cookery for the girls. Why does this lead to more support? Because children were pressurized to join these, and sometimes they would become enthusiastic members of the Nazi youth, and that meant they would grow up supporting Hitler as well. Teachers were controlled by the Nazis. Teachers had to swear an oath of loyalty to Hitler. They were expected to do things like have Nazi flags in the classroom, encouraged to do the Nazi salute, say Heil Hitler at the start and the end of the lessons. And this grew the Nazis more support because children believe what teachers tell them is the truth. And then my final point would be curriculum here, where actually the Nazis ensured in a child's curriculum all their ideas were pushed. So, for example, in maths lessons, there would be questions on how many bombs could be dropped on Warsaw, or the Jews would be discussed as alien Jews, for example. How does this grow child support? Well, children grow up with these ideas every day in school, so they're more likely to accept them as the truth. So, question 2. Bear in mind, just go over this again. 3 clear reasons. Where possible, do them chronologically. It's not always possible, so if you can't work it out, don't worry too much. Focus on the question. Actually explain why something happened. Do not just describe what happens. There's no need for a conclusion for this one. You don't need to use the prompts. If you don't know what they mean, don't guess. Bring in 3 things you do know. And again, 15 to 18 minutes tops. So, in the next video, we will go over how to look at the interpretations and sources for questions 3A, 3B, 3C, and 3D. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.